Hello everyone. In this video lecture, we will look at Russian language media landscape in Latvia. I also cover media that is not based in Latvia as such, but with a significant and regular focus on Latvia. Why Russian media? In my research, I look at the Russian immigrants' acculturation in Latvia and Finland, their language preference and media use. There is an educated assumption that media use can enhance or hinder acculturation, saying that it was necessary to step in and examine the Russian language media, how it has been formed, developed, and how does it look like today. Additionally, I also speak Russian fluently and have been in Latvia for more than 10 years. That is for sure an asset here. So the topic is conflicting narratives, Russian language media landscape in Latvia. Latvia is a Baltic state on land borders with Lithuania, Estonia, Belarus, and Russia. Official language is Latvian, with about 2 million inhabitants, and around 27% of them are ethnic Russians. Let's come to the media landscape. It's been using different terms that describe the media landscape. Some would prefer mediascape, some would prefer media space, but I will generally refer as media landscape. However, Appadurai, an American philosopher, sociologist, anthropologist of Indian origin, offered the term mediascape in 1986. In his theory on the structure of modern society in the form of imaginary world, socially constructed communities imagined by people perceiving themselves as part of it. And he identifies 5 levels of these imaginary virtual spaces. First is ethnoscapes, formed by global flows of tourists, workers, refugees, and immigrants. Second is the mediascapes, or media landscape, formed by the mass media and the new media. So in general, we can say that it's all kind of mass communication taking place within the country can be considered as part of country's media landscape. And please remember, we are looking at Russian language media landscape in Latvia. So without looking at the historical context, it's difficult to understand. So here we'll briefly go on to the Russian language media formation and development in Latvia. During the Russian conquest, Russians conquered Riga in an aftermath of the Great Northern War between Sweden and Russia. Almost a century later, in 1816, the first printed media in Latvia, the Russians Weekly in Riga, was established. Later in 1822, a Latvian newspaper, the first weekly in Latvian, began to be published, which was followed by a weekly It's a Latvian People's Friend in 1832. These were not Russian language media, but it's good also to mention the parallel developments in the Latvian language as well. So the first writers who wrote in Latvian start to come up. In the 1880s, also the Russification policy was begun by Alexander, aimed at reducing German autonomy in the Baltic province. Introduction of the Russian language in administration, court, and education was made to reduce the predominance of the German language. But these policies banned the Latvian language from the public sphere as well, especially the schools. With progressing industrialization in the late 19th century Russia, mass communication also progressed. By 1913, there were more than 1,000 newspapers in Russia, several with calculation of more than 100,000. So the 20th century came with an explosion, the 1905 Russian Revolution, and during that time, the idea of an independent Latvian state was openly discussed. This revolution evoked as it was simultaneously by social and national groups as reaction to the economic and political pressure from German and Russian forces. Mass communication has become a crucial element of political change. Latvia broke away from Russian Empire and declared independence in 1918. The free development of the press began only after 1920s. The short period of independence of Latvia between 1920 and 1940 was the heyday of the democratic, patriotic press. By 1928, Latvia occupied fourth place in Europe in the number of newspapers and magazines for every 100,000 inhabitants. At that time, more than 100 newspapers and almost 200 magazines were published. During the period of independence from 1918 to 1940, the Russian language newspaper Сегодня and its application Сегодня Понедельник were popular. These publications quickly supplied their readers with both local and foreign news. The Сегодня newspaper was also distributed in the Soviet Russia illegally in early years of its existence. For many years, the newspaper was published based on the principle of from Russian to Russian. It printed news from around the world so that Russians in Riga did not feel uninformed. Other publications in Russian were also published during this period, including Russkaya Жизнь, День, Mayak, Narod, Русский Вестник, Russkое Слово, Голос Народа. But none of these newspapers survived World War II, when the country's independence was interrupted by the Germans and by the Soviets. What happened during the Latvian USSR? Speck and colleagues note that the first decade of Latvian USSR proved very difficult. Several waves of mass deportations of at least 140,000 people from Latvia to northern Russia and Siberia occurred. Most notably in 1949 in connection with a campaign to collectivize agriculture. In just over 40 years, the proportion of Latvians in the population dropped from roughly 3/4 to little more than 1/2, and the Russian language dominated the public life, including mass communications. According to the ranks, the Latvian media in Russia continued to come out. The Russian language became a lingua franca of the time. In 1945, the Soviet Youth newspaper was established in Riga. The most important newspapers were those of Communist Party and the Komsomol, published both in Latvian and Russian. In 1953, 71 newspapers were published in the Soviet Latvia with a total circulation of more than 100,000 copies per year. Among them are 8 Republican publications like Cīņa, Padomju jaunatne, Literature un Māksla, Skolotāju avize, etc. In 1954, a television studio started operating in Riga. This marked the beginning of television journalism in the Latvian USSR. Television, along with the radio, was considered a young but powerful mass media, where mainly educational, enlightening, informational functions of journalism were carried out. The film industry in the country developed quite rapidly. Riga was considered Little Paris, where they liked to make films. Russian language media after 1990. Speck and colleagues note that an opposition Popular Latvian Front emerged in 1988 and won the 19 elections. On May 4, the legislature passed declaration to renew independence. After a failed coup in Moscow in August, the Latvian legislatures declared full independence, which was then recognized by the Soviet Union. Much of the media flourished as the economy became more liberalized. Latvia quickly reoriented itself towards Western Europe, and the press system was restructured in 1991. Russian language media deployed a new trend, the unification of Russian speakers in the Baltic states through mass media, as evidenced by the names of these newspapers published at that time, such as the Baltic Times, Independent Baltic, and Baltic Newspaper. And now let us map out currently available Russian language mass media in Latvia. Currently there are many kinds of Russian language media active in Latvia. However, for some reason, enormous changes in their status, names, and owners can be noted in the last 15 years, which makes tracking the outlet pretty difficult. So I have categorized those media available in Latvia. My categorization presented below will give the latest and simple picture of the large map for the beginning of 2020. So these are, number 1, the state-owned public broadcasting services, where the material and the content are produced in Latvia as a unique production or as the translated content from the Latvian language. And the second categorization is private media outlets that partly produce content in Latvia and partly import from media organizations, for example, from Russia. And the third category is other non-Latvian media outlets. What I mean with that is that the outlets which are not established in Latvia. So non-Latvian media outlets with a significant focus on Latvia and directly retransmitted TV channels from Russia. So please do remember the three categorizations. And coming back to the first categorization and what kind of media is there. So first we have Latvian television channel 7 broadcasting 25% of its programming in the Russian language. And then we have Latvian Radio 4 fully operates in Russian language. And then we have lsm.lv, which is the news portal started in 2013 by combining Latvian television and Latvian radio to one common platform, which is also available in Russian. And the second category, which is Latvian private media outlets in the Russian language, there are very many outlets out there. So at least 12 radio channels, 2 TV channels, news portals, 3 weeklies, 1 daily newspaper, etc. Among them, for example, I can name Первый Балтийский канал, Delphi, Radio Mix FM, Vesti Сегодня, Press LV, Baltis Bals, and etc. So let's move to the third group. Other non-Latvian media outlets with a significant focus on Latvia and directly retransmitted TV channels from Russia. What do you mean by retransmitted? TV channels such as REN Baltia, STS Baltia, NTV Mir. These TV channels are based in Russia and popular, and these are offered via telecommunication providers in Latvia, basically retransmitted in Latvia, and they belong to Russian Federation. All of them come out with a specific program designed for the Baltic audiences, and these include RTR, Dom Kino, and Охотник and Rybolov, etc. So among them there are news websites which are based not in Latvia but predominantly with a huge focus on Latvia, such as Balt News and Sputnik News and Lenta.ru, Rubaltic. Let's take Rubaltic for example. They say in their website that it's an analytical portal started in 2013 by scientists from Russia specializing in ex-Soviet countries, especially of the Baltic countries, because they believe that the world fluctuates from rolling towards a confrontation between the blocs. In this context, Baltic states are among the active lobbyists for the implementation of this scenario in the European Union. We now had an understanding of formation, development, and the current situation of the Russian language media in Latvia. Now we can move on to 5 elaborations. Elaboration number 1 is the most crucial point, I think, is that there are disagreements still between Russia and Latvia on 5 issues. The biggest ones are starting from the historical facts or points, for example, incorporation versus occupation of Latvia, to the post-independent citizenship rights and the Russian language status in the country now. Second is that given large number of ethnic Russians in Latvia and the historical background of how Russian language media exists in Latvia, we can be sure that this is not a minority media, but a separate linguistic and information field exists in parallel to Latvian, which many times identify as defending the rights of Russians in the Baltic states. At times, the second categorization, the private media represent the same narratives as those in Russia, which most of the time in conflict with Latvian or European point of view. But other media, the third categorization that is established beyond Latvian target, even more going into frozen disagreements, conflicts, or promoting confusion and discouragement. Number 4, Russia also seeks to reach the Russian-speaking world and compatriots in general, especially in the near abroad, to convince the Russian point of view. Number 5, there are journalistic issues for sure as well. For example, the journalistic style, interpretive versus descriptive, or unemployment issues among the Russian journalists that push them to work with the employers despite their editorial policy or political stand. And the competitiveness in the general media market, especially in the print market, resulting in quick content productions which sometimes end up promoting inaccurate or roughly not checked information. And retransmitting the content from Russia can save time but also results in conflicting viewpoints, or in Latvian side these are mostly called as misinformation or even sometimes disinformation. Number 6, despite the long friendship and mixed families, ethnicities living together, there are ethnic tensions exist and especially keeps reproduced by the politicians and the media. So, coming to the last point, I will kindly raise a question. Looking at the Russian language media landscape, one puts the question, is it a natural desire to have information in the mother tongue, or is it the desire to stick to the imagined fatherland and the manifestation of the Russian point of view? Here are the references for this lecture, and I thank you for listening, and please send your questions, comments if you want. I would love to hear them. Thank you very much.